Mistborn 2, now with more Mistborn. Hey, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erica and I appreciate you being here. Today we are going to be talking about the second book in the first era of the Mistborn series, which is The Well of Ascension, and I'm currently reading through Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. I've just started. This is my second book by Brandon Sanderson. I haven't read him previously because, I don't know, apparently I was living under a rock or something for the last 15 years. So we're reading through it. I've started with the first Mistborn series. You can go, I will place a link to my Cosmere playlist that I've started, so you can go if you want to and see what I thought of the first book, because today we're going to be talking about just this one. What we are going to do is I'm going to break this up into different sections. So I'm going to have first a section where I discuss some spoilers, and then at the end I will discuss my non-spoiler thoughts on this. I think that's the best way that I can set it up, so that people who have read this can get some of my thoughts about, what do I think specifically about some of this? But just like myself, I do not like spoilers, so I totally understand people not wanting spoilers. So at the very end, we'll do a spoiler-free wrap-up just with some of those thoughts. I will put chapters in this video, so feel free to look and jump around. I will warn you before we go into the spoiler section, so no worries. I do want to say the first thing before we even get into this is name pronunciations. I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole on the internet about this because there are some names in these books for sure where I'm looking at the spelling and I'm like, I'm not entirely sure what you want me to do here. So I took to the internet, and of course there are very handily, Brandon Sanderson has answered a lot of these pronunciation questions for readers over the years. However, Sanderson has also gone on the record as saying he's perfectly fine with however people individually pronounce the names, because he says that even he mispronounces the names from how they would be pronounced in world, because he views it like different languages in the world that he's built, and he has an American English accent, so he says there's even names that he pronounces differently when he speaks about characters than the in-world people would pronounce the names. So he has completely sanctioned pronouncing names in whatever way seems right to you. So I just need to make that clear off the bat, because there's a couple names in here that I know are not the official way or the way that I think probably many people say it, but they're the ways that make the most sense for me. So that's where I'm going with the name pronunciation. I hope we're all going to be okay with that, because I'm 2 books in and there's all of these names with these spellings, and my brain is just going to do with that what it's going to do with that, right? Without further ado, we are going to go now into some spoilers, and so if you do not want spoilers, pause the video and check out the chapters. Go ahead and jump ahead to the part where I have deemed safe at the end, because I promise at the end I will not give spoilers for what I'm going to give in my final thoughts. So if you are leaving for spoiler free, I will see you in a bit. Otherwise, the rest of us, we are now proceeding with spoilers. I'll even try to put a big text on the screen right now that says spoilers, just in case. If you don't want spoilers, jump ahead right now, because we're going to get into it. The first thing I think I'll talk about is a few of the individual characters. I had some thoughts that I wanted to talk about. I think, like many people, my favorite character is Sazed, both in the last book, but then even more so in this book. I just really find his character appealing, and we got to see, so much more of that develop in this one, and seeing a lot of chapters. Well, not as many as I would like, but a decent amount of chapters from his perspective. I just really like and respect his dedication to knowledge and truth, and sharing the information that he has with people. He wants other people to have knowledge as well, and just the total willingness to incorporate new information, even if it completely contradicts what he previously thought. He's so dedicated to the truth that he doesn't dig in his heels. He takes that new information and analyzes it and changes, his knowledge or opinions when necessary. And that's a quality that I really respect in people in real life. And so it's definitely like, it drew me immediately to his character in this series. I love the scholarly part of him, but I will also say we saw him kicking some ass with his Farukami, and I really appreciated that too. I thought that it was such a clever like counterbalance to the Allomancy, and seeing him not just hold his own against Allomancers or against these massive warriors with the Koloss, but like really be able to manipulate his metals and his skills and be able to dominate in the battles that he was in too. Man, I was so scared that Sanderson was gonna kill him off, like when they were all fighting the Koloss right at the gates, and I was just like, please don't kill him, please don't kill him, he is not a warrior like by nature. He's such a good person. Like, please don't kill Sazed. Thankfully, he did not. Thankfully, he chose at that moment to have Vin come in and just basically like take over. It was like, right, of course, at the perfect time, which I don't mind authors killing off critical characters. It adds stakes to the story when there's stories where like everything comes out fine for everybody. I don't think they're bad, but they just don't get me as invested because like there's no stakes. I know that everything is gonna be fine. Kill some characters off once in a while, but not the characters I really love. Kill off some characters that I kind of like, but not the ones I really, really love. And I love Sazed, and God, I hope he makes it through the third book. I really love his character. I felt so bad for him when he discovered that Tindwyl was, had died in the battle. It just really like totally crushed his belief system in general, and what he now wonders is what is his place in life and what is the meaning of all of this? Who can really blame him for having this kind of a crisis? He's really, I don't believe he's ever experienced love, really. I don't know that he ever even experienced it from like parental figures. His entire group, the Terracemen, I mean, it's all controlled by it was very controlled by a breeding program. So I don't know that like even the children get to stay with the mother for any period of time, or if they're taken away. I don't know exactly how that works. So, I mean, finally he finds someone who is compatible with him in like every way, and she's dead. Like immediately, she's dead. So I feel very bad for him, but again, I think this will be a good opportunity for even more character growth. He's experienced a completely new and devastating kind of loss, a couple of different kinds of losses, because I don't think that he's ever experienced doubt before in his purpose, but now with her dying, now he's questioning what is the point of any of this. So it'll be really interesting to see where he goes in the next book, because he is such a loyal character to the people that are around him. He feels a real sense of duty to helping. I will be interested to see if that continues now that Tindwyl is dead, if it changes him, if he's going to find his belief again, belief in his purpose, or if he's going to find a new purpose. I don't know. I think he's the last of the keepers, though, from what it sounds like, when Elend ran into the refugees from Terrace, right? So is Sazed the last of the keepers? Does he become like the leader of the people by default? I don't know. I'm assuming when Mr. Brandon Sanderson will answer this question for me in the next book. I think my second favorite character in this book is Orisor, and this is also the second character where I'm probably pronouncing the character's name in a way that some people are gonna be like, that's not how you do it. Sazed, of course, is the first one. But I don't know, that's how I pronounce it. But should I call this character Tensoon? Because it turns out that for the vast majority of this book, we were actually seeing Tensoon as the character, because he was, impersonating Orisor. So I guess I should say that I like Tensoon. I find the idea of Khandra to be really fascinating to begin with, but to see this Khandra, knowing that they are like obligated to this contract, and this character Tensoon, really whether he wants to or not, has to spy on Vin and betray her. He doesn't have a choice because it's the contract. Well, I guess we learn in this book that the Khandra kind of do have a choice, but it's so rigidly ingrained into them that if they break the contract, they're supposed to return to their people for like punishment or execution, right? So he, let's say at least Tensoon, I think, feels like he has to follow the contract no matter what. His contract is to spy on Vin and ultimately betraying her. So I thought that this character, knowing at the end, like I was liking the character as we went along because you could see like his relationship with Vin developing throughout the course of the book. They were both becoming more open with each other and starting to see things from the other's point of view. And then you find out that Tensoon has been the Khandra spy all along. And it gave, honestly, to me, it didn't change my perspective on the character at all, like in a negative way. If anything, it made me view Tensoon more positively, because it was knowing that Tensoon was supposed to be spying on Vin all this time, and he's not supposed to have allegiance to Vin. But throughout the development of their relationship in this book, he gave her a lot of information, a lot of useful information that he probably shouldn't have, not only as a Khandra, but like because his master is Zane, but he still gave her the information anyway. And when she ultimately was fighting Zane, he did everything he could to help her within the bounds of the contract. So I don't view Tensoon in a negative light for that. Actually, it makes me think even more positively of this character's character. And I really want Tensoon to come back in the third book, because like basically at the end of his interactions with Vin, like Tensoon just like took off, Vin let him. I'm assuming we're gonna see Tensoon again before the end of this series. So those two are my favorite characters, I think, in Mistborn so far. I don't know, maybe a new character will be introduced in the third one. Maybe one of the existing characters will get developed in a way to where I'm like, oh my god, that's my favorite character now. But as of right now, it's those two. There were a couple more, I think 3 more characters that I wanted to talk about in just a little bit more detail before I get into my general spoiler thoughts about the book. So moving on to Vin, we saw a lot of her internal monologue struggle in this book, and we saw the author showing how her issues growing up in a lot of instability, abuse, trauma, we saw a lot of how those issues are now playing out for her as she's in a different stage of her life. A lot of her, I think, abandonment issues and inability to trust and her self-doubt is rearing their ugly heads now, causes her to do a lot of things that honestly I found frustrating, but only because it was so believable. So I think in that way, the author did a good job at the characterization, because I think that her thoughts and behavior in this book were totally understandable from the mental and emotional place that this character is at, and like her background of where she's coming from. So I guess good job, Mr. Sanderson, making me kind of annoyed with Vin in this book and kind of frustrated with her. But I feel so bad for her, because what else can you expect? She grew up with just like what a horrible chaos and abuse and instability. Is it any wonder now that she's found this group of people that she cares about? She has a lens, she's got her friends, she's got kind of a place in the world. She's Mistborn, she has duties, a purpose. It's now that she's struggling with a lot of self-doubt, and not just self-doubt, but questioning her relationships with people, doubting if they care about her, because she's just not used to anyone caring about her. She's not used to things, at least with her personal relationships. She's not used to having positive experiences. So it's kind of freaking her out. She's trying to work through a lot of growth in this book, and I see her trying to make the right decisions, trying, even if there's some decisions she makes that I really disagree with. I think her intentions, she's doing the best that she can. I'm anticipating seeing the completion of her development arc. I think is going to go into the next book. It's hard to say because she chose, in her mind she chose Elend, and like she seemed to have a much better sense of like, this is where I belong, this is what I need to do, everything is actually going okay. And then she kind of let this super villain thing loose by accident. I imagine this is going to bring back a lot of those feelings of self-doubt. Maybe she'll regress again in the next book. We'll have to see. I think it makes sense to speak to Elend as well, because it was Sazed, Vin, and Elend, I think, got the most character development in this book. And I have to say, I wasn't really in the like or dislike camp of Elend in the first book. For most of the first book, I was just kind of like, okay, he's some like spoiled rich kid. Like, that's fine, but I don't know, he's kind of playing at, being a rebel in his very comfortable house with his very powerful father. And so, like, whatever. And then at the end, he really, even though he was wildly incompetent, he tried to save Vin. And man, sometimes it is just the thought that counts. He did really try and disregarded his personal safety to try to help Vin. So I have to give credit where credit is due, but I really was glad to see that he got a lot more development in this book. He grew up a lot, saw the realities, and I really actually can respect him as a character now, because in the first book we saw him having all of these ideals but never really having them tested. And in the second book, I think his entire arc was having all of these ideals tested multiple times. And every single time, he chose to stick by his ideals, his values, his ethics, even if that meant that the outcome was not going to be what he necessarily wanted. He still has these values that he knows are important to him, and that's what he lives by. And just like Sazed, it's kind of the same thing. I just respect that as a lot. I respect that in real life with people, so I can really respect a character where they have a set of values and ethics, and that is what they make decisions by, even if it's going to result in things that don't benefit them, or that, an outcome that they really don't prefer. I have a lot of respect for that. The counterpoint to Elend, which I think is the perfect time to talk about it, this is the last character I'm going to talk about, is Zane. I saw him as both the dark version of Elend, which I know Sanderson has said was intended, but also the dark version of Vin. Being Elend's brother, he shows the other side of what it would mean to be Straff's son and to be a Mistborn, and how Elend might have grown up if Elend had been Mistborn and still been his father's son, because I think Elend got a very different childhood than he would have if he had been Mistborn from the get-go. Whereas Zane, not only was he Mistborn, but he was also illegitimate, so he was kind of like, he was openly shoved to the side, shunned, but also Straff needed him to use him. That's like his primary purpose of having so many mistresses, is to try to get allomancers in his family that he can use. So he shows the darker side of the other road, the road not taken, I guess, for Elend, but also the road not taken for Vin, because he grew up in a really hard life, just like Vin did, and he chose kind of the dark side, whereas Vin was luckily discovered by a decent person, right, in Kelsier, and trained her and showed her friendship and love and introduced her to a group of people that she could come to rely on for support and love and friendship and all these things. Whereas Zane didn't have any of that. I think he's a good counterpoint example for what both Elend or Vin could have become if circumstances had been even a little bit different for them. I was kind of surprised that Zane got killed off so soon. I mean, when I think about it, it makes sense, because he was there to test Vin, right, to tempt her. And when she made that decision of, no, that's not actually the life that I want, he didn't really have a super purpose anymore. We didn't really need to see the counterpoint, the dark side temptation to Vin anymore, because she already overcame that challenge. And also, I mean, once Straff died, like, what would be Zane's point then? I mean, we don't need him as a foil to Straff, and we don't need him as a counterpoint to Elend or Vin, so I guess he had to go. I'm assuming the voices that he's been hearing are that super evil being that was trapped in the well, right? I'm assuming that's the conclusion we're all supposed to draw, right? I think so. I want to know more about that, but Zane's dead, so I don't know exactly how we're going to hear more about that unless this evil thing starts talking to other people, or more people come out and they're like, oh yeah, I've been hearing this super evil voice for years. I also really need to know more about this spike through his chest. It was literally just brushed past by Sanderson, so I'm assuming it's going to come back at some point. But, like, how many people are walking around in this empire with spikes in their bodies from some kind of experimentation or manipulation or something from the Lord Ruler? I assume it's the Lord Ruler, because that's how you make the Inquisitors. Not through, like, I get it's the wrong way, I don't know, wrong spike placement, but still, how many people are going around putting spikes in bodies? I'm assuming it was from the Lord Ruler, unless Straff started doing his own weird experimentation. I don't know. I want to know more about the spike through his chest, though, and why we're not talking about it. Those are all of my character-specific thoughts that I wanted to go into. Now I'm going to talk about some of just my general spoiler thoughts. The Mist. And the Deepness. I am not surprised that they are either the same or connected. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially when you look at the Ska superstitions and their really serious fear of the mists for so long. I could see how way back in the day, when the mists were actually dangerous, the Ska retained the knowledge of, like, you don't go out in the mist because it might kill you. But the reasons why, like the reality of it, since the Lord Ruler took away the Deepness, the threat from the mist, right? So I think it would be easy for those superstitions to kind of just become myth that only the Ska still believe, but there's no real world examples to support why. So I wasn't fully shocked by that. I thought that it made quite a lot of sense, but still, clearly, I have no idea how it works, what it actually is. Is it the thing that was trapped in the well? Is it something that's controlled by the thing that was trapped in the well? I'm assuming all of those questions will be answered. I was surprised, though, when I realized that the mist spirit thing that's been, like, following Vin around, that's different from the Deepness. I thought that it was, like, the same, like, part of the dangerous mist. So don't know what that thing is, because it's some kind of being. What is it? I don't know. I'm assuming those questions will be answered. But right now, it seems like there's mist that's connected to this evil entity, but then there's mist that is in opposition to this evil entity, right? Vin and Elend's relationship, I find it weird. I'm sorry. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. Like, how big is the shipping community for these two in the Cosmere? I don't know. I don't see their relationship as realistic because they don't ever seem to understand what each other are talking about or thinking or feeling or doing. And it's not like two people have to be, you know, exactly the same. That would be boring, wouldn't it? But, like, truly, through the whole book, it felt like they were each all the time thinking to themselves, I have no idea what the other person is thinking. They must not love me. I don't think it can last without both of the characters changing to some degree to become more, like, open for communication, because you really can't have an effective relationship, romantic, friendship, really any kind of relationship, if you, like, have a base misunderstanding of who the other person is, right? So something's got to give here. Maybe they're more on the same level in some ways and they're married now. Maybe. I hope so. It was wild to me that we ended the book seeing them together, because I really have a hard time seeing how two people who are so different and don't understand the other person, how they can have like a good relationship where they're both happy with each other. The third book will tell us, right? All right, I'm gonna need to know more about the process of making an Inquisitor, because I mean, that seems real wild, and I need to know more about it. But also, I really want to understand what's going on with Marsh, because in the last book, he seemed to mostly have control over his actions, but in this book, so much of what he did seemed more like he was operating on instinct or like a compulsion rather than things that he necessarily wanted to do. So I'm very curious about the process of making an Inquisitor. I'm very curious about what happens to a person after they become an Inquisitor. I need to know more. Is Marsh evil now? I don't know. And also, why are the Inquisitors seemingly supporting this deepness thing coming back? Like, weren't they created to serve the Lord Ruler? So, like, why do they want this evil deepness thing back in the world? They've switched alliances. Maybe they just go with like the most evil thing that's currently free. I don't know, because the Lord Ruler had this deepness thing locked up, and the Inquisitors, maybe they were like, hey, Lord Ruler is like the most evil thing around, so like let's just be fine with serving him. But then the Lord Ruler was taken out, and they're like, well, now the most evil thing we got a chance at is this deepness thing, so maybe we should like try to support that thing being freed. I don't know. I just know I need to know more. That's what I know. My final spoiler thought. What the hell did Vin set free in that well? What did she set free? I gotta say, as soon as we were going through those creepy caverns, I was like, you don't need to go to that well, Vin. You don't need to go to that well. There is nothing in that well that's for you. You just leave right now and nobody will get in. Nobody's as powerful as you. Let's just like use your allomancy to bring like a bunch of steel and whatever and just pile it on, bury it. Nobody touch it. Leave it alone. But she proceeded, because the book would be boring and the story would end if she didn't. So what did she free? What is this thing? So I'm trying to figure out what the heck the power in the well is. Obviously, it's something that either Vin could use or this super mega evil big bad villain can use. This thing already seems pretty powerful. Like, it can apparently control mist. It can apparently speak to people in a godlike way in their minds. It can compel someone like Vin, you know, like send out pulses to compel her to go different places. So like, if it's that powerful like before when it was locked up, what's it gonna do now? Now it's free and it apparently has all the power from the well. So yes, Mr. Sanderson, my expectations are high. Please answer all of these questions and more in the third book, okay? Those are all of my spoiler thoughts, I think. So now let's move on to my non-spoilery wrap-up thoughts for The Well of Ascension. All right, and now my non-spoiler thoughts for The Well of Ascension. This was definitely a total change in the method of storytelling, like what was going on in the story than the first one. As far as, you know, the first book was definitely an action adventure. It was a heist. There was a lot going on, like trying to set this up, save the world. And this one was heavy political drama and intrigue, and I like political intrigue when it's done well. I thought that it was done well in this book, but I think if you're expecting a lot of the excitement of the first book, set your expectations, because this one is a lot of strategizing, intrigue, backstabbing, just political maneuvering. So very different feel for this one. But I will say, I mean, there was significant amounts of action at very specific parts in this book. This one definitely felt like we're going to take a step back. We're going to focus on how things are going to play out between people negotiating, people using their wiles. So it was, for most of the book, it just felt very different than the first one. But I think that he did it well. I think he did the political intrigue well. There wasn't really any point in this book where I was bored. I think everything that he did had a purpose to the story, which, like, I don't mind that. And I think that it provided like a well-rounded change to the focus of the first book. I like variety, and I think Sanderson showed that he can write both something that's like very exciting adventure, but also something that's a little bit more toned down. We're going to focus more on like the character development and the maneuverings of different people. And we also got to see quite a few shifts in perspective in this story, from like the character perspectives that chapters or sections would be told from, which I like to see. He does a good job. Sanderson does a good job, obviously, I think, of giving characters individual voices, so you can differentiate the character and who the person is. You get a better feel for them. And I really liked that he threw in not just seeing things from a character's perspective, but it felt like he threw in a lot of inner monologue thoughts. So actually seeing like the character's thoughts, and not just this person did this and they thought about this, but actually showing like the thought itself, which I appreciate, because I like to understand characters, so it just helps me understand a character when an author can do that well, which I thought that he did. That's another thing that I hope continues in the third book too. And I really hope that we continue to see more views of like perspectives of adversaries. I always like that in a book. I don't want to just see the perspectives of the characters that I'm rooting for. I want to see the perspectives of the bad guys too. So I hope I see more of that in the third book. With the character perspectives, we also saw just a lot of character development in general, but particularly with three characters, Sazed, Elend, and Vin. We saw them really developed through this, and not just seeing through their behavior, but with being able to see from their perspectives and their inner monologues, seeing the change that they go throughout the course of the book, which I love to see. Especially, I mean, Sazed is my favorite character, and so I'm very happy that we got so much of him. We didn't get hardly any of Ham, which I was kind of disappointed, because in the first book I really loved Ham as a character. We barely got any of him in this book, but I mean, I guess we got a ton of Sazed, so I can't have everything. I should be happy that I got like a really good amount of my favorite character. But it was nice to see, just in general, the character development focus on this one. And with that, there was also, I will say, a bit of a training montage situation with one of the characters in this book. And I think it was done very well. Like, training montages can be super hit or miss for me. This one, though, I thought was well done. It was in small doses. It was just the right amount, just to see the improvement happening over time, which I appreciated. I wasn't bored by it. I wasn't thinking, this is stupid and unnecessary. So I thought, like, A+, Mr. Sanderson, for how you handled the training montage in this one. And then finally, I did read through on Brandon Sanderson's website. He has annotations for this book, which I thought was really interesting, so I read through them. One thing he mentioned was that he didn't want this book to just act as a bridge between the events of the first book and what's going to happen in the finale for the trilogy. While I don't think that this book can really stand alone, I don't think it only acts as a bridge either. I think that it's a really important second step in the story that he's telling. Like, this one didn't suck me in as much as the first one did, but we needed a really clear phase to show what the characters are going to do after the wild ride of book 1 and before we see what happens in book 3. So I understand he didn't want this book to just be a bridge. I don't think it was just a bridge. He answered a lot of questions that I had about the world and the different events that have happened in the histories, different characters. He answered a lot of those questions in this book, but he also set up a lot of new questions that I have now. So it makes me excited to read the next one, because I'm like, okay, you told me just enough to get me even more interested. And that's what I love. I want to read a book that makes me want to see what happens next. And that's how I felt reading this one and finishing this one. Like, I want to see what happens next. Like, these are not small books, so I'm glad that I want to see what happens next. I do have the other one, Hero of Ages. Of course, I had to be prepared. I had to be prepared so that I could start reading this whenever possible after I finished the second one. And after reading the second book, now I look at this one and I'm like, are there enough pages in here that you're gonna give me all the information I need? Gosh, I hope so. I hope so. I love an author who will wrap up loose ends for me. I'm not the kind of person that wants to just like fill in the gaps with whatever I think. No, you created this. You give me the answers. That's how I feel. But so far, everything that I've seen, I think, in this world makes sense. That the events that are happening, the characters' actions make sense. So I have faith at this point that he is going to continue to deliver a satisfying ending. So I'm going to be starting that as soon as I can, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. But The Well of Ascension, overall, I've rated this 4 stars. Like I said, it didn't suck me in as much as the first one, but it was still very enjoyable. And I thought that the character development, the writing was handled really well. And it was just easy to read. That's one of the things I can say for him for sure. I know I said it in the first video, about the Final Empire, and I can say it in this one too. His books are easy to read. His writing style flows pretty nicely. It's just easy to sit down and want to read this, which I appreciate in a book. It doesn't have to be the most sophisticated, complicated writing or situations ever to make me appreciate it. Sometimes you just want to have a good time. In fact, most of the time when I read a book, I just want to be entertained. All right, I'm like Gladiator. I just want to be entertained. That's all I want. And that's what Brandon Sanderson does. He entertains me. So I really recommend this book. I don't recommend this book as a standalone, despite what the author would have preferred. I don't recommend it as a standalone. But as a sequel, I think it works really well. And as a setup to the third book, the final book in the trilogy, I think it has worked really well. All right, and that's all of my thoughts for now, at least, on The Well of Ascension, the second book in the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. What did you think of The Well of Ascension? Did you like it or dislike it? Did you like it more than The Final Empire, less than The Final Empire? Let me know. I thought it was a solid installment to the trilogy, but definitely open to hearing anyone else's opinion on that. And again, it made me really want to pick up the third book, so I'm excited to see what happens to these characters, how everything turns out. But that is all that I've got for you today. So as always, I appreciate you coming by. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. I'll see you next time. Thanks.